We are live. I'm here with Anthony Pacheck. He is training with American Hook Wrestling. That's our good friend John Strickland on the East Coast. Welcome, Anthony.
Hey, good to be here again, Raul.
All right, so we got a bunch of things to talk about, but I want to kind of talk about you in particular, right? You have a match coming up. Can you kind of tell us what kind of match and what where is it going to be and what organization and all that?
Yeah, sure. So on November 14th, I've got an upcoming tournament. The tournament organization is called Subspectrum. It's sort of up and coming promotion in the Midwest, specifically Iowa, the state that I live in. It's run by a guy named Jordan Peitzman out of Des Moines, and he's sort of one of these guys in the no-gi jiu-jitsu scene right now who is doing a lot for sort of the up and coming no-gi scene, more submission only rule set oriented, ADCC rule set oriented, and having showcase events, where it's not just a tournament. It's, he'll have a tournament in the day and then a showcase or, like a UFC card style kind of event at night where you can actually have one-off single matches between grapplers and have a full card, of entertainment. So I really like to support this guy because he supports the kind of grappling that I like to see and I like to compete in personally, which is the more no-gi, less rules, the better kind of thing. And, us as catch wrestlers, that I feel like we as a collective really tend to favor that kind of rule set where, it's all submissions legal, the sort of loosest point system possible, really, to be able to really go out there and just kind of let it fly. And he does a really good job of treating the grapplers really well, and doing his best to try to make sure people get paid at his showcase events. This event, this Subspectrum, does not have a showcase of any kind. It's just a straight up tournament. And so I'll be competing in no-gi in my weight class, 185, and I'll also be competing in the advanced absolute no-gi bracket, which is open weight, and winner gets, I believe it's $300 cash prize. And so, yeah, that's up and coming next Saturday.
All right, that sounds cool. So you mentioned gearing the rules towards ADCC. Are these ones going to be specifically like ADCC rules, or is it a little bit of their own kind of rule set?
Yeah, so the Subspectrum rule set is basically like a modified ADCC rule set where the first couple minutes of every match is submission only, and then the last couple of minutes of every match, there's the point system implemented. And their point system they use, I believe, is pretty close. It looks pretty close to ADCC with some minor tweaks here and there. But yeah, I really like that. I've actually grown sort of more fond of that rule set lately than the actual submission only rule set. That being the EBI rule set that everyone basically uses in the submission only scene, where you've got, just a solid block of submission only time, and then you've got the overtime system after that, if no submission is scored, where you start off in certain positions. I've actually gravitated more towards the point system myself lately. I kind of realized that what was more important for me as a grappler was having all submissions legal, having all submissions at my disposal, leg locks, spine locks, neck cranks, stuff like that. That is actually more important to me than actually having a submission only match, because even if there's a point system, I still have any submission I want at my disposal. Us catch wrestlers, we like to use any and all submissions, that we have. So yeah. I've been liking that rule set a lot.
Okay. So, well, how long is the time limit then of your matches?
Good question. I don't know. That's one of those things that I never really look into too much. I think it'll probably be like 10 minutes max. Probably somewhere between like 6 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I don't really concern myself too much with time limits because they're all relatively close together. Now if you're in a Catch Wrestling Alliance Catch Wrestling match is 20 minutes, so you got to concern yourself with that.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference.
Because I was thinking, because even a lot of the EBI rules is like the actual wrestling or the grappling time would be sometimes even like 7 minutes, right? And then they go to the overtime where you go back and forth to see who can escape or submit faster, right? So I think that can make it where it's like someone can like tough it out for 7 to 10 minutes, and then if they feel like they're stronger in that overtime system. Whoever's listening, I don't know if you don't know what we're talking about, but maybe it's a little too. Maybe we're a little too into Nogi to know about it, but it's just a system where you can go back and forth, and you start where one of the opponents selects whether you can start whether in the taking the back or in armbar situation, and then they'll time if whoever can submit the person faster or whoever can escape faster. And so then like if you can submit your guy in 15 seconds, and then it's his turn to try to submit you, and if you can last longer than that time or if you can escape faster or something, then you can win. So it becomes kind of like this weird back and forth thing, right? Where maybe it can be a little confusing to the audience and maybe even the competitor. I don't know, but yeah, if there's some way that you can finish it, or maybe even have a little bit of a longer time match, and then have some way where it can be finished within that time period, or I don't know, but. I kind of agree with you, where it's like I'm liking the whole Nogi thing, and I'm interested in how people from different backgrounds are kind of figuring out like how to do it. And okay, so before we move into some other kind of topic, what date is your tournament?
It is November 14th in Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay, cool. So I just want to make sure that that gets repeated and stuff so that everyone here knows. And so then now we're going to kind of start jumping into related stuff, but still similar. But I want to make sure everyone is actually. And how does everyone can? Is it going to be streamed anywhere or?
I'm not sure if he's streaming this time since he's not actually doing a showcase of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the cash prize bracket may be streamed. I wouldn't be surprised if he was streaming that. So if you go to Subspectrum, like on Facebook or YouTube, and just subscribe to them, and this on the 14th, you can check for like a live stream or something like that. And if you're a catch wrestler, you'll have your boy holding it down out there for us catch wrestlers in this tournament. Lots of good names.
Yeah, so hopefully everyone checks them out because I've seen them post I've seen them post more on Facebook and stuff, but I mean I'm sure you can find them all over. So make sure you check out Subspectrum. So we're gonna start talking about other things kind of related, but but a little bit different. We're trying to get into some of the Nogi stuff that we're talking about, and then other big news that I spoke about. I think it was like a couple weeks ago before the Gagey fight was the whole IBJJF. Inclusion for no-gi, right, of heel hooks, and I believe in gi it's still going to be banned, and I think that can open up a whole can of worms with regards to gi itself. Because say like even tonight, um, there was like there's almost every week now on Flow Wrestling or Flow Grappling. There's like some grappling event where they'll have a mix of like gi and no gi matches and stuff, and it's seeming like maybe because maybe I'm more biased towards the whole no-gi thing, but it's almost seeming where it's like we're starting to tip that balance where maybe even no-gi is like we'll have more matches of no-gi as opposed to gi, and then like when the gi one comes on, it's like seems a little bit more boring, and at least in my opinion, right? But there's a chance, and this is probably the question I want you to respond to first, would be like, do you think that because of IBJJF still keeping the ban on the heel hooks and stuff for gi, that you think that since no gi is gonna like have that now, everyone who's gonna compete in no gi is gonna start using it, or at least in brown and black for IBJJF, right? Brown and black belt. That maybe gi itself might kind of like lose its popularity even more, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Me myself, I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and I train and teach in the gi. Personally, though, from sort of a sports and entertainment standpoint, I really don't pay attention to gi jiu-jitsu at all. I kind of know who like some of the big names are and kind of like what's going on there a little bit, but I generally concern myself with the no-gi scene. And so, yeah, just kind of clarify for anybody who doesn't know, the IBJJF legalized the heel hook submission and the knee reaping position for brown and black belts in the no-gi division, which is a huge thing. It's a really, really big thing. Doing these Trump hands, it's huge, huge. And for the for the grappling world, because for the longest time, the IBJJF is basically the biggest organization in the world of jiu-jitsu, and for the longest time, they've had a ban on this very good leg lock position, and of course, one of the best leg lock submissions. And so, although they do allow other leg locks and leg lock positions, at once you reach certain belt levels, essentially by making one of the best leg locking positions illegal and one of the best leg lock submissions illegal, they basically kind of neutered the leg lock game in their rule set. You can do certain stuff, and you see guys like Gordon Ryan go in there with a modified game and still do well and still leg lock guys. But it's basically a neutered version of it. Let's be totally honest here. And really, before they made that announcement, it really, at least from most people's perspectives, it didn't seem like they were about to legalize those things anytime soon, really. So maybe it was due to COVID-19 pressure, looking to maybe draw in some more business, or maybe it was just due to the pressure of businesses like Subspectrum, or like Zapatero, organizations like that who are hosting these no-gi grappling events with wide open rule sets and doing well. I mean, they're not raking in huge dollars, but they're starting to come up. There's a scene that's starting to develop even out here in Midwestern states where there's not a high population density. So maybe it was just straight up pressure from that. Maybe it's a combination of that and just COVID taking a toll on the economy for everybody. But yeah, I woke up one morning and just flipped open Facebook and it just said IBJJF legalizes these things. And so that's going to be a really big shift. I do think that we are going to see eventually, IBJJF tournaments look more, like these fight to win cards, stuff like that, which I think overall is a good thing. As far as that stuff being legalized in the gi goes, personally, I don't care because getting to this point where we can have heel hooks in no-gi has taken so long, really, and that now trying to worry about that stuff getting legalized, in the gi, where there's even more sort of this, this dislike or just sort of poo-pooing of leg locks. There's even more of that in the gi scene, or just a lack of understanding in general. Trying to worry about that is just I don't need to. It's not really a concern of mine. The whole main argument against it in the gi is that once you get into a position where you can heel hook, the friction of the pants and the friction of your sleeves and the friction in general makes it so that you're, at least what is claimed, it makes it so that there's a greater chance of injury when you apply the heel because the guy can't slip his leg out. Now, do I think that's true? No, I think that's a bunch of BS, honestly. I think it's just more misunderstanding about leg locks in general. If you want to look up Robert Drysdale, if you're listening out there, go to Robert Drysdale's YouTube channel. You don't know who he is. He choked out Marcelo Garcia with a Darce, I believe, is an 80cc American competitor. He's most known for his no-gi stuff. Like I think he trained Couture briefly, but he also trains and teaches in the gi, and he's got a really good video out, basically countering the argument that heel hooks are more dangerous than the gi. So what gi jiu-jitsu guys do is really, I really don't care. It's none of my concern, but I do think it's a huge step forward, big progress to see the heel hook and the reaping position legalized in the biggest jiu-jitsu organization in the world. I know it's going to get me to more of their tournaments. I'm still going to support more local tournaments, like Subspectrum and stuff like that, because they were doing it when no one else was, and I want to see my local scene grow. But you're definitely going to see your boy on the IBJJF stage soon.
Yeah, that's great, and it'll motivate you to get that brown belt and all that, just so that you can be doing all that, right?
That's right. That's right. My school actually just got a new affiliation with Rafael Lovato Jr. So yeah, next belt's up. I'll be a Lovato Jr. brown belt. So look forward.
All right. Well, because that was the other thing that was kind of going on, especially say if we talk about 10th Planet, where it's like you'll get a lot of 10th Planet schools that'll just be like, well, I don't want it. But basically, for IBJJF, you have to like register, and that's the other thing. There's a lot of bureaucracy, right? You have to kind of register as a coach, so you can be a recognized coach and a recognized school through IBJJF, so that your students can then be recognized and all that. So there's it has a lot to it, and there's probably even more to it than that. But with regards to a school that only does no-gi, like 10th Planet, then fewer affiliates of theirs were wanting to go through all that bureaucracy, so that like a lot of them would be like, why do I want to pay to be recognized, and then you guys go do some compete in some modified rules that we don't even really practice because it's so neutered, like you were saying earlier, right? So maybe we're going to see like an opening up, or maybe we'll see more 10th Planet there, or some other schools might like maybe the competition will get more deep, and it might be more exciting, right?
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. I love nothing better than to see the IBJJF Nogi scene to explode and become even bigger. Right now, it's why a lot of people who compete consistently in IBJJF, winning an IBJJF Nogi World Championship is not considered that prestigious. It's sort of looked down upon compared to the gi divisions, and I love nothing better than to see that flip flop, or at the very least even out, because that's just pushing no-gi to a higher stage. It's giving it more prestige, more chance of cash prize, and anytime that happens, that's always good for catch wrestling.
Yeah, I think so too. Because it's like the rising tide lifting all the boats, right? But yeah. So what I wanted to say too is like you're totally right. Where it's like you had these, say, like you have Fight to Win or these other organizations, where you do see these IBJJF World Nogi champions, and then they get submitted in more of a free, like Fight to Win, or other organizations where they allow basically all these locks and stuff. So yeah, you're right. It's like yeah. So yeah, I don't really pay attention to gi stuff, and so it sounds like you're not really paying attention. So yeah, it seems like. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, us as catch wrestlers, we don't need to pay attention to the gi stuff. Let them do their stuff. They don't want heel hooks. They don't want reaps. That's fine.
Mhm.
That's not really our big thing. And sometimes, I like to compete in gi every now and then, but it's not my main focus. My main focus as a competitor is no gi. And so although it might grind my gears that that there's all this prestige still given to gi world championships, where apparently the baddest grapplers on the planet don't compete with heel hooks, that's fine. We don't have to tear them down. We just have to outgrow. We can just go our own way and outgrow, and that'll be perfectly fine. And in the long run, if I was a betting man, I think no-gi in the long run is gonna overtake, and it's gonna become more popular. But if gi jiu-jitsu went away completely tomorrow, I'd be a little sad. I'd still like them to be around.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't mind if they're there or not. Because yeah, it is almost like even though you might, well, they've even separated in IBJJF, right? Like they'll have their world competition, and then they'll even have Masters Worlds, but then they'll have their own separate, on a separate month, right? The Nogi Worlds, right? So they've even kind of separated. You can like be in your own world oblivious to the other world, the other planet, right? And then totally exist, right? Totally coexist, but not even you can join both if you want, but yeah, you
Yeah,
can.
and I think it's important to say too. Not only do I not really care about gi jujitsu, um, I also don't really care too much about the IBJJF. Although it is good, and that will draw me into more of their tournaments. They weren't there making those moves when it counted. Now you've got these Fight to Win organizations, Subspectrum, Sopatera, organizations like this who were there and who said, there's a demand here that we're going to fill. We're going to do it. We're not going to make a lot of money. We're going to grind, work really hard, and work our asses off for this labor of love and build these organization tournaments. And so now the IBJJF is doing this. That's great, but I'm not going to suddenly flip flop like, oh my god, now I'm just going to go. Now the IBJJF changed things. Now I'm just going to go solo compete in IBJJF. Like, no, it's too late. It took too long. Maybe in the long run, if they keep making moves like these, I'll come to appreciate them more. But they can't, at least for me, they can't win my heart that easily.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, cool. That's a good point to add there too, because yeah, it's true. It's like we have all these, and even like a lot of people call ADCC the Olympics of grappling, or so. I mean, uh, they've been around for a really long time, and it's like they've it's like they've worked and laid the framework for being so
Yes,
huge, right?
exactly. Yeah, they laid that foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And I like watching ADCC. It's great, but there is that issue with ADCC as far as like progressing the rules, where they've got these rules in place, and there's big time, like chic and oil money at the top of it. That for whatever reason makes it really hard to get rules changed. Like there's still the rule in ADCC where it's like their guys are like rolling off the mat into cement and into tables, and they like don't stop the action. And that's been around like since the beginning. It hasn't get that changed. So although I do like that, and that is a cool kind of like Super Bowl event every 2 years, I don't think we should put so much stock into ADCC either, because if dumb rules, like the rolling off the mat rule, and also just like their kind of vague point system in certain areas they still haven't gotten right, then I think I think your time and energy is best put into your local your local tournament or your local promotion, like mine with Subspectrum, who is making these kind of moves that we want to see and doing them more on the local level.
Cool. Yeah, great point. Because that was the thing. It was like ADCC got postponed not because they couldn't find a place to hold the trials in the United States, because they could have, but then they said that like their referees, because of their rules, right, were so specialized, and they weren't allowed to come into the country because of our travel ban right now. So they decided to postpone it, right? So. Uh,
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, too, because like I was saying, with the vagueness of some of the rules, ADC refs, they are very specialized, And I just real quick, I think a lot of the reason why I do like ADCC rules is because they do, to a certain degree, kind of treat the turtle position as more on the same par as the guard position, and they call themselves a submission wrestling tournament. So they're not, although a lot of competitors are jiu-jitsu competitors, like it is expressly a submission wrestling tournament, and the rules do, and at least in my opinion, cater to a more like generality of grappling, and the end result is that it's more friendly to us, as catch wrestlers, but also other styles too. I think they've got it. The positional hierarchy is what I'm getting at. I think they have a better sense of the positional hierarchy than like the IBJJF does.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a good point as well. Definitely. 'Cause so for people who aren't maybe as into it, I mean, like a lot of times right now, even still, it's like a lot of people are saying like, "Oh, don't give your back," and but a lot of times going to turtle, or we might call it ref, can probably get you out of a situation even easier than staying on your back and trying to keep someone in guard and stuff. So, uh,
Especially if you know how to use it.
what was that?
Especially if you know how to use it.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. So, um, but the thing is, so like if we show something like that with catch wrestling, maybe make a YouTube video, but then you'll see people who are just so ingrained with your run of the mill jujitsu. They'll be like, no, you never give your back. But I want to kind of talk about like say in MMA, it's like a lot of people are getting off of the ground. If they get taken down, a lot of times people are going to ref and then they're tripoding and then they're standing back up or using the cage and then turning their back to the person, not getting choked. They're still defending and they're able to stand back up. So it's like I think we might be seeing that more and more because there are a lot of wrestlers or people who are trying to learn wrestling to enhance their MMA. But yeah, hopefully, like it hasn't spread. You still see the whole idea where they're like, "Oh, you're giving your back," and they're complaining like, "That's never going to work. You're going to get choked out." Or it's like, if you know, like how you said earlier, it's like if you know what you're doing, you'll be fine, right? You'll be able to get out. You have a lower chance of getting choked out or whatever.
Yeah. I've been fighting this battle since pretty early on in my grappling career, and just the conclusion that I've come to, as it might be jaded, but the conclusion I've come to is just we need to start our own shit and outgrow, because there's enough people where there's enough demand. At least when you combine the entire kind of like no-gi jiu-jitsu world, including catch wrestlers, maybe like MMA guys, there's enough of us there who see the kind of BS there and just kind of the lines that are repeated over and over and over. It's like you'll get on like you'll this like gi and no gi debate, which is just like it's not even an actual like debate. It's just two different things. Like which is better, gi or no gi? Like these conversations are still being had. They were being had 10 years ago, and it's like people still can't understand like these are two different things. They're two different sports. Like wrestling, judo. But yeah, and then of course the whole leg lock debate, which has gotten better. Don't get me wrong, it's gotten better. And then points versus no points, which isn't really a debate either. It's just two different rule sets. It's just these same old, just bad arguments for not, for basically reasons why you shouldn't, train nogi or more look into more nogi stuff or more catch wrestling kind of things, And so I personally, I gave up on that, and I'm just like, we need to focus our time and energy on people who think like us, and if stuff gets changed from the inside, like it happened with the IBJJF legalizing heel hooks and reaping, that's great. That's a bonus. But trying to count on that, rely on that for progression, I think is just a losing battle. The mentality that's ingrained in that world, where it's just sort of repeating these lines that don't make sense, in my opinion, runs so deep that it's just not worth it. It's not worth it.
Yeah. You just continue building our own thing, right?
Yeah.
Finding our audience, right? Because that's the whole thing with virtually any kind of even like you can even talk about Christianity and all that, where it's like, oh, you don't like the way we do it, then we're going to start our own little division, right? And then
Sure.
right, they
Yeah.
find the audience and it grows. So yeah, same thing. We'll do that with our own catch wrestling and no-gi and all that.
Hopefully so, man. Hopefully so. Will it ever be as big as jiu-jitsu is, or will be? Who knows? Who knows? It might always be a smaller subset of the grappling community compared to jiu-jitsu, because let's face it, catch wrestling is violent, it's rough, and it's not for everybody. And as the world gets softer, the world gets less and less more suitable for catch wrestling. So we'll see. But yeah, I think trying to pump up the nogi scene as much as possible only helps us.
Yeah. So speaking about that, so I wanted to bring up this other thing we kind of mentioned off air like a while back. You had kind of an epiphany about catch wrestling, and I was wondering if you can kind of elaborate on that, like what it is to you, and because you've also now, so we've known each other for years now, right? And like you've really took a deep dive into the study of catch wrestling. So can you kind of show us some, or at least tell us some of these gems that you've discovered?
Sure, yeah. So just a little background on this, and sort of the idea or argument that I'm about to get into is purely my opinion. I'm not claiming to be some catch wrestling god. This is just my opinion and the way that I feel, so if you got a different opinion, please go do what you want to do. That's perfectly fine. I'm not telling anybody not to do anything. This is just my own personal insight. I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I've been training jiu-jitsu since 2009. Had a little bit of wrestling in high school before that. And then shortly after I got into jiu-jitsu, I discovered catch wrestling online, and I just really took to it really well. It just sort of suited me very well, given my background and my mentality towards grappling. Had a really good coach as far as mat wrestling goes in high school, so I really took to that. And just sort of like looking into catch wrestling, there's, it's sort of hard to say that there's been like one definitive catch wrestling rule set. Generally how it goes is, in catch wrestling, you can win by pin or by submission, which I think is pretty good. I tend to agree with that. I like that, whether submissions were outright allowed back in the day, or whether they were just things that were allowed to, kind of like manipulate somebody into a pin. I've heard that before. That's something that can be debated. But generally, how catch wrestling rules have gone is, pin or submission, and any kind of extra rules that you want to agree to before the match. Between you and your opponent. But in the modern era, at least when I've gotten into catch wrestling, I began to notice there's really this there's this dividing line that comes down in the middle of catch wrestling rules, and that dividing line is whether or not the pin is in play at all times, or whether or not the pin goes out of play when someone has a submission hold on or locked in. So obviously the second rule set, the latter there, would definitely cater to more of a jiu-jitsu audience, more of a modern submission grappling audience, where it's like, I've got, I'm on someone's back and I'm going for rear naked choke, and then they roll over and they're putting my shoulders on the mat, but I'm on their back. So should the referee be counting a pin there because they're putting my shoulders on the mat, or should the referee not be counting a pin there because I'm going for a submission? I'm on his back, I'm in a dominant position. Like, how does that suss out? How, which lane are you picking? Are you going to say that, no, that guy's getting pinned, the referee should start counting? Or you say, no, you don't count a pin because you want the guy to work for a submission because the submission is more definitive than the pin, basically. That's the argument, and as a jiu-jitsu guy, as well as a catch wrestler, I can see that side, I can see where they're coming from there. Because the modern submission grappling audience wants to see submissions. They don't want to see pins as much. That's not as definitive for them. So sort of the epiphany that I came to was that, because I was undecided for a while. I was like, this makes sense, where you would just have pin and play all the time. It's very simple. It's very clear. It's very clean. It's very easy to understand. And it tends to make people have better wrestling basics. There's more emphasis on the wrestling where the pins at play at all times. It looks more like a wrestling match, which this is catch wrestling, and I think it should. That might be my own personal bias coming from like a folk style background, but that's my take on it. And when you sort of insert this rule into that clean simplicity, that once someone gets in a submission, then this suddenly becomes a jiu-jitsu match, and it's like, so a jiu-jitsu match breaks out in the middle of a catch wrestling match. That's basically what you're saying here. Like, yes. It's like, okay, I might be on board with that, but then how do you define what's a submission hold? That's very arbitrary. You take IBJJF, for instance, you don't even get points for a submission attempt. You just get an advantage point, and that's one of those things that's super subjective, a lot of times. I remember, I think it was JT Torres, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, lost in the finals because his opponent got an advantage point going for like a fist choke or something like that from guard. And it was super controversial. And so when it comes down to defining what is and what is not a submission, you get really sketchy there, and it gets really arbitrary. And so I don't like that, because we as catch wrestlers know that you can a lot of times turn anything into a submission.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Very simple things like a forearm on the neck can become a submission.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people who are more jiu-jitsu oriented don't necessarily see that. And so it also kind of skews the concept of submission. I gotta get some water. My throat's drying up real quick.
Go ahead.
One second.
Yeah, go for it. That's totally fine. Yeah, so so for those of you who are still with us at this time, yeah, hopefully you guys are kind of understanding that, where it's like, so we did have one event in Singapore where someone was trying to do a sweep. They were under, it was a mat trans match. And so then his opponent was trying to do a jiu-jitsu style sweep where he rolled onto his back to try to get him over and maybe try attempt a submission. But anyway, Matt based out and kept his opponent on his back for even 5 seconds or so. Before I called the pin. Kind of was a little generous on that because I wanted to make sure that he knew that he was pinned before I called it. And so that was kind of one of the things that happened, where it's like keeping the pin in play at all times. That's part of wrestling and therefore catch wrestling. Right. So are you back? You good? You're all good?
Yeah, I'm back. I usually don't talk this much, so my throat just cashes out super quick. But yeah. So I came to the conclusion that I'm squarely on the side of pins count anywhere. Keeps it clean, keeps it simple. And if you want to see more submissions, there's plenty of no-gi submission tournaments out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
But when you inject this rule that suddenly the pin stops once a submission hold, whoever's defining that comes into play, it creates like this weird catch wrestling jiu-jitsu like hybrid kind of thing, where it just becomes it becomes harder to understand, at least in my opinion, as someone who does grappling. And I would personally rather do a straight up pure old school, if you want to call it, catch wrestling match where pins count everywhere, or I'd rather do a jiu-jitsu match, sub only or ADCC, jiu-jitsu match. Do one of those two, but sort of meeting in this, at least in my opinion, an unhappy medium or unhappy middle. I'm just not into it. I'm just not into it. I think I appreciate what you're going for there, to try to draw on a more modern audience into catch wrestling. But I think I don't know. I think you're gonna get more respect just being straight up pure catch wrestling is what it is. Like, yep, that guy was going for a triangle, but you know what? He got pinned. And that's our rules, and that's what it is. And you got to wrestle. You got to wrestle more. You can't rely on just locking your legs around someone, locking your arms around someone, and then just getting the ref to stop calling a pin.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, that's just my own personal opinion. If you feel differently, go do those rule sets, support those rule sets,
Yeah, but I think you kind of see that. I think people can kind of infer from what you're saying, where it's like we'll have people organizing catch wrestling matches where, yeah, they definitely come from more of a modern understanding of grappling or a jiu-jitsu background, and so then they don't necessarily value that pin, right? So then you'll see some rule sets where they're like, oh, you can be on your back for like 5 seconds there to see if you can't, pull guards or I don't know, or get out of guard or do a sweep or I don't know, whatever. But you see all these weird things where it's like, oh, at least to me, it just kind of lets me know it's like, oh, you're coming from that kind of like jujitsu background, or there's some kind of more modern understanding of grappling, which we're trying to do catch wrestling here, and so but the thing is like, yeah, the catch wrestling we have kind of like we still have some of these old timers who are still alive telling us how it was back in the day, right? We have evidence and stuff, so I'm still gonna support the whole pin is in play at all times, right? Um,
I might even suggest this. If you're going for, well, we want to give guys more time off that from these positions. Extend the pin count. You know what I mean? So yeah, let's say you do get into a triangle choke. And instead of 3 seconds, you've got 5 seconds or 10 seconds. To finish that. But all you're doing is you're just extending the pin count. You're not like swapping the pin in and swapping the pin out at various points in the match, which just becomes like weird. It becomes weird and kind of confusing to me. I think, if you're going to make modifications, you want to be surgical about it and elegant about it. And I think extending the pin count, like in judo, they have that extended pin count, where it's, there's like 20 seconds or whatever on the back and you win. You can even do that, call it no-gi judo. That's cool. I'd watch that. So yeah, I think if you're going that route where you want to see more submissions, just extend the pin count. You'll get that without sort of like sacrificing the core principle of catch wrestling.
Yeah, and so a jiu-jitsu match doesn't break out in the middle of a catch wrestling match, right?
Yeah, because that's essentially what's happening.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, and I think that's a good way to put it so people can understand better, like. Because you'll see here. So anyway, so you're not confusing people. Also, the spectators who are watching, that's the last thing you want to do, right? It's like people go in, and that's what's cool about catch wrestling, where it's like you can easily tell a spectator, you're gonna you take your buddy in, like, hey, let's go check out this catch wrestling match. How do you win? There's no points. Someone has to beat the other person by pin or submission. That's pretty.
Okay.
Cool.
And okay, now the pin's in play. Okay. Oh, now it's not. Now it's not anymore. Okay, now he can't get pinned. Okay, now he can get pinned again. Okay, now he can't. Like, why? Who wants to do that? Especially in the world of catch wrestling, where it's like it's damn near dead. It's like trying to do stuff like that is just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's go ahead and just do a recap on your match. So when is your Subspectrum match coming up again? Give us the date.
Yeah. So my tournament is November 14th in Des Moines, Iowa. I'll be competing in my weight class, no-gi, and then I'll also be competing in the advanced cash prize bracket, no-gi as well. I'm the only catch. I think I'm the only catch wrestler. Maybe there's one or two more who might be out here, but I always like to try to represent for catch. Be respectful, train hard, compete hard, compete smart. So I'm gonna try to do that, win some dough at the same time.
Do you have like a American Hook Wrestling rash guard? Or are you gonna go shirtless? Or are you gonna wear a rash guard?
I don't have a American Hook Wrestling rash guard. I wear spats and a short sleeve rash guard, so I think I'll do that this time. But I know old John Strickland. He's got I think it's like a Spring Tees site or whatever set up where you can basically get the American Hook Wrestling logo on anything and everything you want. I think I saw a baby bib in there somewhere, so it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to think that I could get it on a rash guard.
Yeah, hopefully we can do that, and because like a lot of us had you seen in our older pictures where a lot of us had the same black and red catch wrestling rash guards. So yeah, we should probably do some more. So yeah, I'll talk to John about doing rash guards and stuff.
I think a rash guard in this order, is in order. I mean, who wouldn't want to see this on the back of a rash guard? That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's really cool. Okay, anything else coming up for you, or are you just kind of focused on your tournament right now?
No. As far as jiu-jitsu goes, I don't have. I'm just focused on this tournament right now. Nothing planned after that. But yeah, setting my sights is eventually competing in some no-gi IBJJF stuff. Earlier on in my jiu-jitsu career, I competed in a handful of those tournaments, and they're well run and everything. But just the lack of available submissions to use, at my belt level drove me out, and the lack of submissions at the highest belt level. When you got, when you are working and progressing, towards black belt, but even at black belt, you can't do certain stuff. To me, that's just not fun. And I like this to be fun. I like to be, as pure as possible. And so I was sort of, I was driven away because of those things. But now that this has happened, I'm a 4-stripe purple belt. Just get my 4th stripe. I'm a purple belt. Closing in on brown. So after I get that brown belt, I'll be heel hook and knee reap legal, and I'll be looking to get in the podium in those tournaments as well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Yeah, so let's keep working towards that. Yeah, wish you the best of luck. So if anybody listens to this, how can they get a hold of you?
I'm mostly, I don't really use Twitter. I usually just use like Facebook and Instagram. So if you want to get at me, hit me up on Facebook. It's Anthony Pacheck, Pacheck. And if you're interested in catch wrestling, I can, and you're actually serious about, starting up some if you got a training partner that you want to train catch wrestling with, or maybe you have like a club of people somewhere that you want to, I'm with American Hook Wrestling. If you're serious, we can get you set up with that as well in John's distance catch wrestling training program, and where you have access to, ask John questions, send him videos for reviews, stuff like that, and just overall help spread and try to regrow catch wrestling. Because I mean, let's face it, it's basically on its deathbed. But it's hanging on there. We're giving it life. We're sticking as many IVs in the arm as possible, trying to keep this thing alive, because you and I know, if you've had any kind of wrestling or grappling background before, once you see catch wrestling for what it is, it's very hard to unsee. And it's hard to look at the modern submission grappling world the same after that. So I'd love nothing more than to see this program expand and see more people learn authentic American catch-can wrestling.
Awesome. That sounds good. So hopefully we can have you back soon. All right. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, as always, thank you, Earl.